In terms of the topic that we are discussing at this point, I mean, outside the room, inside the room, we've had multiple talks and we have talked about data a lot. And as everybody has been saying that data is the new oil, but one of the things that we need to understand is how do you refine that oil? How do you make sense out of that oil? And that's essentially what we are covering today. So how do you unify, how do you utilize that data to make sense out of it is essentially the topic for the discussion. We have a lot of experience on these three chairs here to take this forward with me. In terms of the first question that I would want to start with is essentially, before we talk about making sense of data, collecting data at this point with the privacy regulations that are coming up, do you think there's any change in terms of, say, the focus shifting from third-party data to first-party data and how that is impacting the collection or the unification of data? So I think we can get started with that, and anybody of, I mean, anyone out of you who wants to start with that, the change that you're seeing in terms of data collection coming out of it.
So Editorji is a media platform, so we deal in short video news. What we've seen in the last few years, more so in the last year, is the fact that all your third-party data is any third-party data is over. It's like there's no cookies anymore, and so anybody who has to do anything with data, it either has to be first-party or zero-party. So I think more and more what most of us are doing, most companies are doing, is building their own data lakes now and relying on the first-party data. Because anyways, what you're getting on the third-party data before also was not the data which would give you accuracy to actually build your product on. So that is what. So now the third-party data is, the story is over. It's more of first-party data now.
Got it. In terms of the similar change, any aspect of the business which is probably getting impacted because of this change?
Yeah. So I think again it completely depends on business to business. I think since I'm part of Times Internet, and we see that division within the different businesses in the organization as well. So for instance, definitely the publishing house part of it is facing a bigger challenge there. But there as well, the idea has been to move as many users, get consent, have as much more reliable data as possible, so that it helps with targeting as well. And that's where collection of the data is very important, even in context of how do we approach the user to get their consent for data, right? So anything that we are putting in context in terms of how that actually adds to the user experience, that plays a vital role in getting buy-in from the user and then being able to generate those recommendations which ultimately help in the user journey.
Got it. Deepak, anything from your side?
So it's basically like, say, the third-party data is readily available, right? But if it comes to the first party, there's a lot of groundwork that the company needs to do, right? They need to define the business goals first and understand what sort of data is needed, right? What sort of analysis they would be doing and what action they need to take further on that particular data. So I think that entirely depends on a lot more like how to collect that data on the first party level.
Got it. Got it. In terms of, see, another aspect of the discussion, which is making sense out of this data, right? We talk about personalization, we talk about engagement, we talk about acting on insights, but when we talk about the real value that it generates, are there examples in which, say, you've seen the data-led approach in terms of engagement, could be personalization, could be business decisions that you took as an organization? Just want to understand if there are good examples that could be takeaways for the audience.
See, I think the first thing which I tell a lot of our data teams is that, it's good to have a lot of data. It's really nice. But now, what do you want to do with the data? Like a lot of people go like they are really this thing that, okay, we need data, but how much of data do you actually need? Right. And what are you going to do with the data? So that actually is the main question which needs to be asked. So now a lot of people, they take the data and they're just using the data only from the point of view of selling a product. But that, at some point that really doesn't work. Because at some point you also have to start thinking from a consumer point of view. Like, okay, I am a consumer, I have this data, and how do I make best use of it? I'll give you, for example, we use tools like, we are in the publishing business. So we use tools like when we have the data, as to how do you do. And real-time data is another thing which we work with a lot. So, for example, what we've started doing right now is in the last couple of months, we publish multiple stories with different headlines. It could be the same story, which goes out with multiple headlines. So now these stories, based on the data that we have, they are targeted at different users. And then, we get a real-time feedback and we see what's working, what's not working. So that's how we are using data at the moment on real time and making use of data.
Got it. So basically running a lot of A/B tests and using that data to make changes in real time is one of the experience change for the user. Ashish, anything from your side in terms of, say, acting on the insights that you're getting from the data?
Absolutely. So, in fact, if I were to talk about the Times Prime context, it's a paid subscription app. So, these are the users who have already paid at the start of the year to get access to different benefits that come with part of the platform. So the expectation of the user is anyway higher than what you would expect from, say, a free platform, right? And to be able to serve those interests is where data comes into the picture. So we talk about personalization all the time, right? Now, this is essentially driven by the different data sets, I would say, of the user that we have. This can be demographic, this can be the acquisition channels, this can be also behavioral. So all of the clickstream data that we get on the platform, that helps us determine, and of course that's where platforms like MoEngage play a role to be able to synthesize that data and to be able to drive those recommendation and personalization journeys, both from an app engagement standpoint, which for instance for our in our context would be the different benefits that user is availing on the platform, and then also to be able to drive those business metrics going forward, which is again for this particular case retention, right? So I think it starts from the product metrics themselves, that which are some of those objectives that you are trying to drive, and then work backwards that what is the value that you want to provide the user and what is the data that you need to provide that value.
Got it. Deepak, anything from your side?
So I'll quote the various instances that we adopt at Moglix, right? So if we talk about the e-commerce journey, there are many users who are coming to the platform, but they're not able to make the decision, right? Like say which particular brand is popular, or like say they should buy, right? What sort of price range the products are by. So we did the data analysis and present those stories to the customers, right? Which brands are more popular, are being sold more frequently at our platform. And that helps in boosting that confidence of that customer, right? Like say, we should go ahead with buying this particular product. And that helped in increasing the engagement as well as the conversion at our end. Secondly, like say, talk about like say, we have the users coming from different corners of India, right? Like say from various pin codes. We did the demographical profile and then like say evaluate like say a lot of data analysis on that, like say what sort of user is that? Like if it's a new user or a repeat user, right? Coming from which platform? He's interested in which category. So basis that we find out like say RTO like say is a very pain point at our end. Then we did a lot of data analysis and combined with the AI as well to predict the probability of that RTO. And then improve that funnel improvement for the RTO. So that has helped in the increasing the profitability for the company.
Got it. Very interesting. Actually, one of the things while I was sitting and listening to the other sessions was also the conflict between marketing and product with respect to the data-driven approach, right? And usually the marketing minds are very creative and the product folks are, usually they back the data. So anybody can answer that question, not specific to anybody, but say in terms of developing that culture of taking decisions based on data, right? Is there any aspect that you can give as a suggestion for the audience that you have probably inculcated in your teams? And you mostly coming from product teams, I'm assuming, would find that easier. But having said that, as an organization also, is there something that as a practice or as an approach that you all have adopted has helped with that data-driven approach at an individual level within folks in your team? Is there anything that, just picking your brains on this, because one of the discussions in the last session was around this, so just wanted to bring this up.
Yeah, I think any activity that any function of the organization does, that is done again with a specific objective, and data in a sense is the best evidence of that objective, right? So even from any kind of say brand marketing that in our context happens, there is this culture of having that impact of that activity that can be share of mind, that can be measurement of direct traffic, etc., right? So that is something that has to be very measurable to an extent. Of course, it would not be the same as because in the end, when you are actually calculating the impact or the ROI of that activity, these are some of the hard metrics that can play a role. So I think it's more around developing that culture across those different functions to be able to determine that even from a creativity standpoint, those things are also something that should finally feed into the end objective that all the functions are working towards.
Got it. Got it. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so, it's also from the consumer's point of view, right? If you're not going to act on the data that you have and you're going to just throw content or advertising or something, the product which the person's going to see, the consumer is going to see, is going to be very cluttered.
Right.
And, you will have a drop off. So, every organization and every person in the organization has to do this. They have to go to the data, they have to go to the data teams, they have to do what the consumer wants, and that's what the data is showing. Like, again, I from the publishing background, so I'll say till a very couple of years back, most publishing houses, the editorial teams, like, the journalists, they used to be in a remote island. They never said, okay, we are going to show what we like to show. But now it's no longer that. Most of these houses, they have something called an input desk, which are the guys who are actually monitoring news and putting it out. I'll give an example of our company, the company which I used to work before. There we had like some 7 people who were top-notch journalists managing the team. But now we have 1 journalist and 3 SEO people doing the same thing because it's all about data. So it's all changed.
It is true. It is taking the jobs eventually. I'm just kidding about that. But anyway, unless Deepak, you want to add to that?
I just want to say, product and marketing teams should work hand in hand, right? So they should be a business goal and both are aligned to achieve those goals. So sometimes both happens to work in silos that creates those confusions, right? So we should have some, we usually adopt this process of monthly connect with the teams, right? So that gels well with both the teams and reduce those discords between the teams. So that helps.
Got it. No, that's a good advice in terms of one of the changes that probably you brought in. Right, in terms of, and also, because it's short in time, I just want to understand, say, as a rapid fire question, if you have to just give one advice in terms of making sense out of the data to the people who are sitting in the room, what would that be? Just a crisp answer in terms of what you think as a takeaway for the audience should be. And a short answer to that. And anybody can start again.
So I think one of the first things which everybody has to remember with the new privacy laws coming in, you have to be very clear as to what data you're taking and what permissions you're seeking from the customer. It's no longer that, you can put a small, asterisk saying that if you have downloaded my app, you subscribe to all my terms and conditions. It's no longer like that. So you have to be very clear as to what permissions you're taking from the customer as to what you're doing with them. You can't just say that, okay, this customer is on my mobile app, so I'm going to send him a newsletter, I'm going to send him that. That's not going to work anymore in the next coming years. So, you have to be very careful as to what permissions you're seeking, how you're storing the data. It's very, if you need to scrub the data, if your customer asks you to scrub the data, you have to be your systems have to be robust enough to scrub the data immediately and ensure that you're not targeting that customer again.
Got it. Actually, before we move on to you, Ashish, one of the things I was reading recently was something similar to this. This is basically that companies are also developing metrics to track how well they're able to manage the privacy rules. Is that something that, and this is a global practice that is coming into picture, we just wanted to understand at your organization level, are you also looking at metrics to understand how well as an organization you're managing the privacy guidelines which are out there? Is that something that you've started doing? Is that something where you're headed?
So I wouldn't say in terms of metrics. Of course, there is a compliance angle to it, so which we all have to adhere to, and then there are audits and so on, right? Plus, just on the collection basis, so as Biswajit mentioned, even if it is not a requirement, say at an India level, these are still requirements that exist at least at the App Store level, right? So in any case, this is something that you have to comply with, right? Which go through again regular checks. So that's why it has definitely, it's not something that you can opt out for.
Got it. I think we can carry on with the final takeaways from a point of view of an advice.
Yeah. So again, as Biswajit mentioned on the collection bit, I'll just talk a bit on the analysis bit of it, which is, I think it's extremely important that we identify the metrics well, because that's where, as a product manager, I've seen a lot of teams and even struggled with that going wrong, right? So essentially, if you end up chasing the wrong metrics, that is a lot of effort gone to waste. So identifying the right metrics and identifying the data that would help you solve for those customer pain points that ultimately lead to the metrics. Those are the extremely important things which actually require 70-80% of the time. Data, to an extent, can help you solve for it, but to be able to put your mind together into what is the actual value that you're providing and what are those metrics that data can help you guide towards, those are more important points in my opinion.
Got it.
I'll say we have to be more agile nowadays with the changing landscape, right? Like say if we see the last 3 years, the COVID came, no one predicted that, right? And it, like say, changed the entire industries, like say the supply chain being there, or like say the infrastructure changes were there, or the like say the services segments were there, right? Similarly, like say the now AI and like say those chatbots, ChatGPT has come, so that is changing from the tech perspective. So one of the key takeaways would be like say to be more agile, to be more like keep on learning, and keep on grooming with respect to using these technologies that are coming up.
Got it. No, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. And on a closing note, I think the broader takeaways and the advice that was given by you folks was being more customer centric, right? I mean, whatever output you're getting out of data has to be driven towards the customer's experience. I think the takeaway that you shared was more about being agile because of the situation and the times we are in and the changing technology. I think we need to be more agile with the data as well. And lastly, from a point of view of measurement in particular, be more metric centric and have an outcome which is very, very clearly defined, right? So thank you so much for that. If in case there are more questions around the things which were discussed, we can always take those questions, I think, outside the room. But for now, we'll just call it out. I mean, thank you so much for taking